Go ahead, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Hope. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Glancy. I'm an attorney. Very grateful to be part of this series on intellectual property and arts law issues with SELC. And this is the second session. So the first session, Fatima presented about copyright. And today we're going to go over some basics about trademark law. Here's a quick disclaimer that if you need personal legal advice, contact an attorney, including you can ask questions during the office hours through SELC. So as we started talking about last time, there's different types of intellectual property: copyright, trademark, patents, trade secrets, and the right of publicity. And today we'll talk about trademark. When you think of trademark law and trademarks, you already know what a trademark is just from being out in the world, right? It's things like Coca-Cola, it's things like Frito-Lay, things that have the little R in a circle. That's the most basic way to understand trademark. And trademark can be protected for anything that is part of branding in the marketplace. So it has to be something used that's building recognition in the eyes of consumers, and it can be of all kinds. It can be words, logos, sounds, packaging, slogans. And trade dress is a category that's kind of a catch-all for all other kinds of things like shapes, designs, interior decor of a restaurant, like the red bottom of a designer Christian Louboutin shoe. All of that is trade dress. So I want to take you quickly through 5 main steps to analyze and strengthen your trademark rights. So I can talk at the end a little bit about how to DIY on a budget, but overall, I want everyone to have just like the basic overview of the best practices in trademark law to choose strong marks, build your rights, and continue to enforce your rights. It can be an intensive and expensive process, but it can be one that's definitely worthwhile if you really care about protecting a certain brand designator. So steps 1 and 2 that I'm going to present are things that you can do even if you don't want to apply for a federal trademark registration, which I'll explain, but they're important things as you're building a brand or building a business, or assessing rights and other things that you want to protect. The first step is to assess the strength of your mark. So in trademark law, not all marks or potential marks are created equal. Some are going to be much easier to protect and some are harder to protect. So there's this spectrum from generic all the way to fanciful. On the generic side is something that just is the word, is the thing it's describing. So here it's carpet cleaning company as an example. Everyone who has a carpet cleaning company, the idea is they need the right and ability to use those words. So no one can own those words. They're never going to be able to be protected by trademark law. Slightly different is something that's descriptive. So this is something that's not flat out generic, but something that is really describing what the product is. So an example here is American Airlines. It is an airline based in America, so it's going to be harder to distinguish that in the eyes of consumers, but it is still capable of being protected. American Airlines has invested millions of dollars, obviously, in making sure people connect these words with its airline. So it is possible, but it's going to be a harder battle to eventually achieve distinctive trademark rights. And then stronger marks someone can choose are suggestive, arbitrary, or fanciful. And these are things where there's a mental leap you have to make between the products or the services and the brand. So an example is Apple. Apple Computers is arbitrary. The word Apple has nothing to do with the computer, but if it were an Apple company, you couldn't name your company Apple. But because it's not Apple's, it's fine, and it's a strong trademark. The next step, again, is, and this is something you can do even if you don't want to eventually apply for a trademark registration, but are just trying to figure out your rights, is to conduct a clearance search. So this is something that we always do at our firm when we're helping someone apply for a trademark as a first step. You want to see what's already out there. You want to see what is out there on the US Patent and Trademark Office register already. And you want to see what's out there on the internet, people who may be accruing what's called common law rights, like they are already out there. Consumers recognize them, even if they don't have a registration, they still have some rights. And you want to see what the results show and look at the results and say, is there anything out there confusing with what my potential mark would be? And the test for likelihood of confusion is a legal test that the USPTO looks at and also courts use when evaluating whether two marks can coexist or whether they're too confusing. You look at whether the marks are similar in their commercial impression, right? So the sound, appearance, and likelihood that like you can mistake one for the other based on how it looks or sounds. And then the similarity of the underlying goods and services. So there's like an Apple Bank that's completely different company than Apple Computers, and although they have a very similar mark in the same word, they have different goods and services, so they can still coexist. Although it's likely they probably have some kind of agreement about that among each other. And then what people often ask me if an attorney is necessary to go through these steps, and it's not necessary. It's not absolutely necessary, but I think it's really great because an attorney can give you an objective opinion on all of this, because sometimes entrepreneurs or artists, it's like you're really excited about your idea, you think it's really unique, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's unique in the world of trademark law. So sometimes I have to break the hard news to my clients that actually there's something out there that's already that's likely to have a likelihood of confusion, problem or something like that. So I think having an attorney in this stage can be really useful. All right, so like I said, steps 1 and 2 are something that anyone can do as they're thinking about branding. But the best step I recommend, if you're serious about protecting a brand or a mark, is to file for federal trademark registration. It's a long process. It can be expensive. There's several hoops to jump through. It can easily take over a year. And I can talk more about the advantages if people have questions, but it's really important in the internet age because it gives you presumptive ownership of your rights throughout the United States and can be helpful in enforcing your rights on the internet. State registration is also something you can do if you're plan for your operations to be limited to a state, but it can be overridden by someone who already has a federal trademark registration. So that's why it's important to do a search. Trademark rights don't last forever. They only last for as long as you're actually using the mark in the marketplace. So you need to renew your registration periodically to show proof that you're using the mark on your products or services. And then something really important is that the US Patent and Trademark Office, or no government body, is responsible for enforcing your rights. So if you have a brand you care about protecting, you need to monitor it out in the world and make sure that no one is basically on your turf or infringing your mark, using it inappropriately, or doing something that's too similar. So what I always recommend is subscribing to a monitoring service that will sift through the USPTO new applications, or even sift through the entire internet to look for if people are infringing your brand or doing something too similar. And then you can send cease and desist letters or even bring a lawsuit to enforce your rights. And this is important because you need to continue to show that you're distinct in the world and in the marketplace. And if you fall off with this, then you can start to actually lose some of your rights. And whenever you are using your mark out in the world, you want to make sure you're doing it with written licenses and that include quality control provisions. So in the sharing economy, folks like to share things, right? You want people maybe to use the mark that you like and want to give permissions. Permissions is another word for license. But if you do that, you want to make sure that you're including key quality control provisions so that you avoid what's called naked licensing, which is when you fail to control the use of your mark and you lose trademark rights as a result. So USPTO registration can be great. And if everyone had all the money in the world, I would recommend it in every case because you can achieve incontestable rights in the US. You can be clear to expand your business without worry about other people sending you cease and desist letters. You can use it as an offensive tool, like a sword, to build what you're trying to build. And then on the other hand, you can use it as a shield because you know the path is clear. You can avoid being accused of infringement, and you'll show up in other people's clearance searches. So when a big company like Nike might be looking at their next brand and doing their own brand clearance, they'll see that you're there and they'll take you seriously because you have a federal trademark registration. Happy to hear if anyone has done this process and if you want to share with the group how it went. I think I'll pause there to see if anyone has questions, but I can also hop into like the nuts and bolts of how you apply for trademark registration, but I think I'm at time for the Nano-Training, so I'll stop.
Thank you, Alex. I would say if anyone has any questions, they can drop them into the chat. And Alex, you can go a little bit longer if you'd like to.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Perfect.
So if you want to file a US Patent and Trademark Office trademark registration, there's several steps. The first two steps here are the ones I already said, but you should not forget these because choosing a strong mark and making sure that the field is clear for you to register will make your life so much easier. The way that it works is there's a fee that the USPTO charges per mark per class, and then you can also consider using an attorney, in which case you have attorney's fees. And what you do is you apply for your mark, right, your word or your logo in connection with a class of goods and services. There are 45 classes of goods and services. So you pick which one describes your product or services, or which, few, or whichever you think are the most important. And then you describe within that numerical class what exactly your product is. So for example, class 25 is the numerical class that deals with clothing, but you have to be more specific than clothing. And so it's a hat company, so they might say hats and beanies. And there is like a science to writing these descriptions. And all of the USPTO records are public, so you can look at similar brands or similar companies to what you're trying to do and see how they wrote theirs. That's one of the great things about the USPTO is it's all public record, including registrations, applications, and back and forth with the USPTO that folks have received on their applications. To register, your mark has to be currently used. You can't like reserve a trademark that you're not using, except that you can if you apply on an intent to use basis, which is 1B. In that case, you have to do some follow-up and eventually show that you are using the mark, and you have 6 months to do that once the examining attorney at the USPTO approves your application, but you can file extensions for up to 3 years total. When you apply for a trademark registration, you have to submit what's called a specimen, which is a proof of real life use of the brand. So it's a photo of your product with the brand, or it's a screenshot from your website with the brand. And there's also specific rules about what counts as a proper specimen. If you have a potential trademark that is a word, but also there's like a specific font or logo design, generally it's best to apply for the words alone, because a word mark will be protected no matter the format, no matter the font, no matter how it may be displayed. Whereas a design mark is only giving you rights to that specific expression and that design for the words. Office actions are are very common. This is when the USPTO doesn't like something in your application and lets you know through an office action. It's kind of scary, but it happens in the vast majority of cases. The office action could be on anything from like a minor, formatting or submission error to a major problem like a likelihood of confusion rejection. A lot of times people ask me if they need an attorney or if they can do it themselves. So what I would say is that an attorney will be definitely helpful, but it ranges how much attorneys charge. So you could go to like an online service, like a huge trademark firm that does stuff online. Maybe it'll start at $750. Our firm charges $1,600 for a trademark for one class, and the USPTO fees are on top of that. So if you're on a budget and you can't afford, close to $1,000 in legal fees, know that the USPTO fees are still start at $250. And you could, if you haven't done the clearance steps, you could be facing a steep road ahead. You can do it yourself, and there are tools to help you. So the Trademark Assistance Center is a hotline that the USPTO has, which is great. You can call them as many times as you want. They're super helpful, but they can't give legal advice, but they can help. They can still help a lot. There is a Trademark Manual of Examining Procedure, which is what the attorneys at the USPTO use to make determinations about applications. So you could go there and read it and ask specific questions. On the last training, Fatima shared this resource called Charlie.ai, where you could put a big manual into it and then ask questions of the manual using this AI tool. So you could use that AI tool with this manual also. And then you can keep an eye out for free clinics and workshops to get more customized advice on your brand clearance and trademark application. I've listed a few places you could look for, but also, if people want to stay up to date, I'm happy to alert you, or sometimes I tell people I know about different clinics. So if you want to be in the loop on that, I can try to tell you about them.
Alex, it
So
looks like,
that's it.
oh, thank you. That was
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you
Okay,
so
great.
much. It looks like there is a question in the chat, and I'm gonna stop recording right now, but you do have a question, so that's fantastic.
Okay.